Ikenna and his search party returned, exhausted and disheartened. They had found no trace of the princess. As they reported to the king, Nkwere listened from behind a pillar, his conscience weighing heavily upon him. In the lush, green hills of Igboland, there lay a prosperous village called Umweze. The village was ruled by a wise and just king named Obi, who had a beautiful daughter, Princess Adana. The princess was beloved by all for her kindness and grace. However, unbeknownst to her father and the villagers, Adana carried a terrible secret, a curse that threatened to change her life forever. One fateful night, as the moon hung full and bright in the sky, Adana sneaked out of the royal compound. With a small bundle of belongings and a heavy heart, she set off on a journey that would take her far from everything she had ever known. As dawn broke, King Obi awoke to find his daughter missing. Panic spread through the palace and soon engulfed the entire village of Umweze. The king sent out search parties in all directions, but Adana had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, the princess trudged through dense forests and across winding streams. She had heard whispers of a man in a distant village who could help break her curse. The journey was perilous, but Adana was determined to rid herself of the affliction that threatened to turn her into a yellow python snake each night if she didn't complete her mission. After days of travel, Adana arrived at the village of Nkwere. Exhausted and hungry, she sought refuge with an old woman named Anne. The kind-hearted elder took Adana in, sensing the young woman's distress. As they sat by the fire that evening, Adana revealed her story to Ni. She spoke of the curse and her quest to marry a man from Nkwere for precisely 1 week to break it. Ina listened intently, her wise eyes filled with compassion. "Child," Anne said, "I know of a young man who might be able to help you. His name is Chidi, and he has a pure heart. But be warned, the path you seek is fraught with danger." Back in Umweze, King Obi was beside himself with worry. He had sent messengers to all neighboring villages, offering rewards for any information about his missing daughter. The once jovial king now spent his days in somber contemplation, wondering what could have driven Adana to leave. Unbeknownst to Obi, the source of Adana's curse lay hidden within the palace walls. A jealous courtier, Nkwere, had secretly placed the curse on the princess, hoping to remove her from the line of succession. As the search for Adana continued, Nkwere worked tirelessly to cover his tracks. In Nkwere, Adana met Chidi, the young man Ne had spoken of. He was tall and handsome, with kind eyes that immediately put Adana at ease. Chidi listened to her story with growing amazement. "Princess," he said, "I cannot claim to understand the ways of curses, but if marrying me for a week will help you, then I am willing." Adana's heart soared with hope, but she knew that the challenge ahead was great. They had to convince the village elders to allow a hasty marriage, all while keeping the true reason a secret. As Adana and Chidi prepared for their unconventional union, whispers spread through Nkwere. The sudden appearance of a beautiful stranger and her impending marriage to one of their own sparked curiosity and suspicion among the villagers. The village elder, Obierika, called for a meeting to discuss the matter. Chidi and Adana stood before the council, their hearts racing. Chidi spoke eloquently, weaving a tale of love at first sight and the need for a swift marriage due to Adana's impending return to her distant home. Obierika stroked his grey beard thoughtfully. "Our traditions speak of taking time to know one's bride," he said, "but they also speak of following one's heart. If you both are certain, we will not stand in your way." Back in Umweze, King Obi's health began to deteriorate. The stress of Adana's disappearance had taken its toll. The royal healer, Nkechi, tended to him day and night, but even her skilled hands could not cure the king's broken heart. In the shadows, Nkwere watched with growing unease. He had not anticipated the king's decline and feared that his scheme might unravel. As guilt gnawed at him, Nkwere considered confessing his crime, but the fear of punishment held him back. Meanwhile, the search for Adana continued. A group of young warriors, led by the brave Ikena, ventured deeper into the forest than any search party before them. In Nkwere, preparations for the wedding were in full swing. Despite the rushed nature of the event, the villagers threw themselves into the celebrations with gusto. Women prepared elaborate dishes, men decorated the village square, and children practiced traditional dances. Adana found herself swept up in the excitement, momentarily forgetting the urgency of her situation. As she helped the village women prepare, she felt a pang of homesickness for Umweze and her father. Chidi noticed her melancholy and took her aside. "Adana," he said gently, "I know our marriage is not born of love, but please know that I will do everything in my power to help you break this curse." His words touched Adana deeply, and she realized that in Chidi, she had found not just an ally, but a friend. The day of the wedding arrived, filled with music, dance, and feasting. Adana, dressed in a beautiful wrapper of vibrant colors, looked every inch a princess. Chidi, resplendent in his best attire, couldn't help but be struck by her beauty. As they performed the traditional marriage rites, Adana silently counted the days. 1 week, she reminded herself. 1 week to break the curse and return home. The celebration lasted well into the night, but as darkness fell, Adana grew anxious. Would the curse still affect her now that she was married? As the moon rose, she held her breath, waiting for the transformation. But nothing happened. For the first time in months, Adana remained human throughout the night. In Umweze, King Obi's condition worsened. Nkechi, the healer, worked tirelessly, using all her knowledge of herbs and ancient remedies. But it seemed that only Adana's return could truly cure the king. Ikena and his search party returned, exhausted and disheartened. They had found no trace of the princess. As they reported to the king, Nkwere listened from behind a pillar, his conscience weighing heavily upon him. That night, unable to bear the guilt any longer, Nkwere made a decision. He would confess his crime and face the consequences, even if it meant losing everything. As the week of Adana and Chidi's marriage progressed, an unexpected development occurred. The two began to form a genuine bond. Chidi's kindness and understanding touched Adana's heart, while her strength and determination impressed him. They spent their days exploring Nkwere together, learning about each other's lives and dreams. However, as the 7th day approached, Adana grew increasingly anxious. She knew that staying married beyond a week would trap her in the curse forever. Despite her growing feelings for Chidi, she couldn't risk such a fate. On the eve of the 7th day, Adana confided in Chidi about her fears. "I wish things could be different," she said, tears in her eyes. Chidi, though saddened, understood. He promised to support her decision, whatever it might be. In Umweze, Nkwere finally gathered the courage to confess. He approached King Obi's chambers, his heart pounding. As he entered, he found the king in a fitful sleep, with Nkechi watching over him. "I have something to confess," Nkwere announced, his voice trembling. He recounted the whole story, his jealousy, the curse he had placed on Adana, and his regret. Nkechi listened in shock, while the king, awakened by the commotion, struggled to comprehend the betrayal. As Nkwere finished his tale, the king's face contorted with anger and pain. "Find her," he croaked, his voice weak but determined. "Find my daughter and bring her home." The 7th day dawned in Nkwere, and Adana knew it was time to leave. With a heavy heart, she prepared to say goodbye to Chidi and the village that had become a second home to her. As she packed her meager belongings, a commotion arose outside. Curious villagers gathered around a group of strangers who had just arrived. Adana's heart skipped a beat when she recognized the royal guards of Umweze among them. Ikena, leading the group, approached Adana. "Princess," he said, bowing low, "we've come to bring you home. Your father is ill and needs you." Torn between her duty to her father and her newfound life in Nkwere, Adana looked to Chidi for support. His eyes were sad but understanding. "Go," he said softly. "Your father needs you." As Adana prepared to depart with the royal guards, Chidi made a sudden decision. "I'm coming with you," he declared. The princess was surprised but grateful for his support. The journey back to Umweze was filled with mixed emotions for Adana. She was worried about her father, but also apprehensive about facing the life she had left behind. Chidi's presence was a comfort, a bridge between her old life and the new one she had briefly tasted. As they traveled, Ikenna filled Adana in on recent events, including Nkwere's confession. The princess was shocked to learn the true source of her curse and the extent of Nkwere's betrayal. Upon reaching Umweze, Adana rushed to her father's bedside. King Obi, weak but overjoyed, embraced his daughter. "My child," he whispered, "I thought I had lost you forever." Adana, overcome with emotion, explained everything: the curse, her journey, and her marriage to Chidi. The king listened in amazement, his eyes filling with tears of relief and understanding. As Adana spoke, a strange sensation came over her. She felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, as if invisible chains were falling away. The curse, it seemed, was finally broken, not just by her week-long marriage, but by the love and understanding she had found along the way. With Adana's return and the curse broken, King Obi's health began to improve rapidly. The joy of having his daughter back seemed to breathe new life into him. As he regained his strength, the king turned his attention to the matter of Nkwere's betrayal. A council was called to decide Nkwere's fate. Many called for severe punishment, but Adana surprised everyone by advocating for mercy. "His actions were wrong," she said, "but his confession saved us all. Let his punishment be to make amends for the harm he has caused." The king, moved by his daughter's wisdom and compassion, agreed. Nkwere was stripped of his position in the court and tasked with serving the community he had wronged. As life in Umweze settled back into a rhythm, Adana found herself at a crossroads. Her week-long marriage to Chidi had ended, but the feelings that had grown between them remained. Chidi, unsure of his place in this new setting, prepared to return to Nkwere. On the eve of his departure, Adana sought him out. "Stay," she said simply, taking his hand. "Not because of a curse or obligation, but because we choose each other." Chidi's face broke into a wide smile. "I was hoping you would ask," he replied. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like the beginning of a new adventure. The news of Adana and Chidi's decision to marry, this time for love, spread through Umweze like wildfire. The village erupted in celebrations that rivaled any in living memory. King Obi, seeing the happiness in his daughter's eyes, gave the union his wholehearted blessing. The wedding preparations became a joint effort between Umweze and Nkwere, bridging the gap between the two villages. As the days passed, new friendships were formed and old rivalries were forgotten. On the day of the wedding, Adana stood beside Chidi, her heart full of love and gratitude. She thought back to the frightened young woman who had fled her home, burdened by a curse, and marveled at how far she had come. As the years passed, Adana and Chidi's love only grew stronger. They worked together to bring positive changes to both Umweze and Nkwere, fostering cooperation and understanding between the villages. Adana took on more responsibilities in governing Umweze, proving herself to be a wise and compassionate leader. Chidi, with his kind heart and innovative ideas, became beloved by the people of both villages. When King Obi eventually passed away, Adana ascended to the throne with Chidi by her side. Their rule ushered in an era of prosperity and peace for Umweze and the surrounding lands. Many years later, on a warm evening, Queen Adana sat with her grandchildren, telling them the story of her journey. The children listened with wide eyes as she spoke of curses, bravery, and the power of love. "But grandmother," one child asked, "weren't you scared when you left home?" Adana smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Of course I was scared, she replied. But sometimes we must face our fears to find our true path. Remember, my little ones, that every curse can become a blessing if you have the courage to see it through. As the sun set over Umweze, casting a golden glow across the land, Adana looked out at the thriving village she and Chidi had nurtured. She thought of the young princess she had once been and the queen she had become. The curse that had once seemed like a burden had led her to her greatest joy. And so, in the heart of Igboland, the story of the cursed princess who became a beloved queen lived on, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and forgiveness.